The first report was broadcast just a week or so after the beginning of the Iraq War. In a segment for NBC's Dateline, Brian Williams recounted a harrowing incident under fire. The date? March 26, 2003.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq.
In his report, Williams says he was traveling with a group of 4 Army helicopters based in Kuwait, large ones called Chinooks. They can carry troops and, in this case, equipment to build bridges in Iraq so motorized units could cross a river.
On the ground, we learned the Chinook ahead of us was almost blown out of the sky. That hole was made by a rocket-propelled grenade, or RPG.
After that attack, all 4 choppers landed, and a sandstorm grounded all of them for 3 days and 2 nights. The Army sent soldiers to guard the choppers as well as Williams and his team. In that initial report, he makes no further mention of the RPG attack, or that his helicopter took fire. He does say soldiers told him they spotted 4 Iraqis with what looked like an RPG during their first night in the desert.
What we didn't know was we were north of the invasion. We were the northernmost Americans in Iraq.
Fast forward 10 years.
Our good friend Brian Williams.
10 years later to the day, March 26, 2013. Brian Williams told that story to David Letterman, except this time saying he was on one of 2 Army choppers that were hit both by RPGs and small arms fire.
2 of our 4 helicopters were hit by ground fire, including the one I was in.
No kidding.
RPG and AK-47.
The question, of course, is what exactly happened in those 10 years to make Williams change his story? As with all war stories, it's complicated, and Williams' version slowly evolved. A few months after the helicopter incident, NBC News published this book, Operation Iraqi Freedom. In it, the account is vague. No mention of which helicopter was attacked or where exactly it took place. The story didn't really resurface until a few years later, when Williams returned to Iraq. In a blog post in 2007, Williams celebrated the life of Wayne Downing, a retired Army general who was an NBC News military analyst who was in the chopper with Williams that day in 2003. Williams referenced the Iraq incident again. Some men on the ground fired an RPG through the tail rotor of the chopper flying in front of ours, Williams wrote. There was small arms fire. A chopper pilot took a bullet through the earlobe. All 4 choppers dropped their heavy loads and landed quickly and hard on the desert floor. Williams' obituary for Downing began with the incident, and the obituary left the impression that Williams and the general were forced down by enemy fire.
When the Chinook helicopters we were traveling in at the start of the Iraq War were fired on and forced down for 3 days in a stretch of hostile desert.
In 2008, in a different blog post, Williams added a new detail. This time, all 4 choppers took fire. He wrote, all 4 of our low-flying Chinooks took fire. We were forced down and stayed down. Then, in 2013, to mark the 10th anniversary of the start of the Iraq War, Williams went on The Letterman Show. And he also talked with the actor Alec Baldwin about it for a radio podcast. Instead of just writing about it, now he was telling the story of bullets fired into his helicopter.
I've done some ridiculously stupid things, like being in a helicopter I had no business being in Iraq with rounds coming into the airframe. But
Did you think you would die?
Briefly, sure.
And then this, just about 10 days ago, when Williams was at a New York Rangers hockey game and appeared with an Army Sergeant Major who was in Iraq and with the helicopter unit at the time. The soldier had helped protect Williams and his team. Now, a big change in the story. This is how he told it on NBC Nightly News.
The story actually started with a terrible moment a dozen years back during the invasion of Iraq, when the helicopter we were traveling in was forced down after being hit by an RPG.
The previous version had evolved to all 4 choppers being fired upon. This latest one added the RPG. Some soldiers who also were there began speaking out, saying on Facebook they had no memory of Williams being on the one chopper that did take a rocket-propelled grenade. And were all of the helicopters told to land because they had been fired upon? Or was it because of that sandstorm? Truth is a tricky thing in war.